Hey friends, I'm thinking right now about my piety and my earnest desire to honor my dad in my 20s. I'm not saying there weren't any other times besides my 20s, but specifically an incident when I was 26. I was playing with my niece in the living room. I was enjoying being with her. She's was maybe at the time a year and a half old, and my dad had gotten a blood pressure cuff um, measuring thing and had it in the basement and was wanting me to come downstairs and get my blood pressure checked. He thought it was really cool and wanted to do that. And I just said, no, I'm playing with Ellie right now. I don't want to do that. So he's hounding and hounding. And finally, I'm just like, what do I have in my head? Versus like, oh, if somebody asks you to go 1 mile, go 2 with them and honor your father and these different things. So then I'm like, okay, I'll go. And I said, but I am just doing it to be nice. I was honest. I'm just doing it to be nice. So I start walking down the stairs and he says to me, oh, it must be a fluke then because you don't have the character of someone who would do something just to be nice. So I stopped. I turned around. I went back upstairs and back to the living room. And then what ensued was just a screaming, yelling, blah, blah, blah. Me yelling back at him as well because it was outrageous that, sorry, just a second. It was outrageous that he would say something like that to me and completely overlook the kindness that I was trying to offer him after he had badgered me. You talk about a nagging woman in the Bible, and it's better to live on a corner of a rooftop than a nagging wife. Let me tell you, there's a whole lot of nagging. And I am sharing this publicly. And I'm not doing it like I fear God. And I am also not afraid that he is going to be mad at me as I share these stories because he knows so many people are held captive by this stuff. And it's really important for me and what I believe my calling is to help people understand the way some people who are earnest and love Jesus are applying scripture in ways that keep them trapped and under oppression and in the path of someone who's destructive. He said to me, that must be a fluke because you are not the kind of person who has a character to do something just to be nice, something like that. I have the exact words written in my journal, which again, you know what? That's not keeping a record of wrongs. What that's doing is collecting experiences and evidence for identifying a pattern, which is really important. We need to be able to identify patterns. And so that's actually wisdom. Yeah. I was so heartbroken. After that event, I went to Panera and I read my Bible and I had my journal. And I was just so brokenhearted because once again I had failed. And I wrote in my journal, I don't even deserve the prayers of my friends. I fell so badly. I was getting ready to be a guest speaker at my grandma's church for their missions night. And I'd been on several mission trips and they asked me to speak, which was quite an honor, for my little self. And I had asked friends to pray for me. And then I go home and have this horrible event with my dad. It was so crushing. It was so heartbroken. And then I returned back to the town where I lived in and worked a couple hours from my parents' home. And my best friend lived with me at the time, I lived with a couple of best friends, and they would notice just how downcast and how it took me several days to recover from having been underneath that oppression. And I still wasn't at a point that I understood I could really totally separate myself from my dad because I believed that my dad was my sanctification opportunity and that if I left proximity to my dad, that I was robbing myself and robbing God of the work that he would do in my heart and in my life through the difficulty of being around my dad. And I didn't realize the scriptures that tell me to stay away from and have nothing to do with somebody who has those kind of destructive patterns. That day at Panera, I have marked in my journal Titus 3:10 and 11. And I think the last part of that verse says, warn a divisive person once, warn them twice, and after that have nothing to do with them. I think for they are warped and condemned or something like that. I don't remember the exact wording, but it was a verse that was telling me to avoid my dad. And I didn't have any other commentary with that verse, but I know myself and I know what I thought during that time of my life was, well, I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect either. I'm not responding well to his badgering. And also I thought, well, divisive people, they're probably the people that, are our enemies and that we're at war with as like our country or something like that. I wouldn't have thought, if I would have understood that scripture is describing someone like my dad. And it is very sad, by the way. I do grieve that. I grieve that for him. I grieve for him, and I grieve like on his behalf, and I grieve for the fact that we can't have something normal or good. But I didn't realize that would apply to someone with those kind of patterns. I thought, oh, well, what if that's talking about me? Am I the divisive person? Am I the, this, that, whatever? Yeah, ask yourself those questions and then seek counsel and get perspectives from other people in your life to find out if you are the divisive person. But also know that, yeah, that really does happen. And that there are people in our lives that have persistent patterns of harm. And when that happens, there is scripture that would tell us to not have anything to do with them. 1 Corinthians 5:11 talks about if someone calls themselves a brother and does all of these destructive things, including being a reviler. A reviler is someone who assails others with offensive language. 2 Timothy 3:2-5 talks about a lot of behaviors that are destructive, including being abusive. And then it says at the end, avoid such people. It doesn't say avoid such people unless they're your dad. Avoid such people unless they're your husband. It just says avoid such people. And we can all find our own sin on that list for sure. But pay attention to the patterns. That's what we do. We pay attention to the patterns. Thanks for listening. I meant to just make a really quick little short video, but it went on, and that's fine. Okay, I'm at Walmart. We were at the pool today, and I'm going to go pick up some ice cream for me and my family, a little movie night at our house. So I love my family. I'm so thankful, so blessed to get to have them.